Have you ever found yourself boiling with anger, your heart racing, your mind clouded, ready to explode at the smallest trigger? In those moments it feels impossible to regain control. But what if I told you there's a simple method to calm down in just 5 minutes, not hours, not days, just 5? I'm not saying this as someone who was born calm or immune to anger. In fact, I used to be quick-tempered. I've slammed doors, raised my voice, and let rage push me into actions I regretted later. But through experience, trial, and practice, I discovered a way to turn that fiery energy into calm within minutes, and it's a method anyone can use. The reason I chose this topic is because one of my students recently sent me a story. He went into business with a partner, but because they didn't set clear agreements, conflicts grew. They argued daily, each side felt betrayed, and anger consumed them. Their business stopped moving forward because emotions ran the show. This story reminded me, and now I want to remind you that anger destroys focused relationships and opportunities. Today, I'll give you a 2-step method to overcome anger in just 5 minutes with examples you can use in real life. When anger hits, the first and most important step is not to react immediately. It sounds simple, but in reality, it's the hardest thing to do. Our instinct tells us to shout back, to defend ourselves, to slam something on the table. But successful people, those who have mastered emotional discipline, know this truth. The first 5 minutes after you get angry are critical. If you can hold back during that short window, you can save yourself from regret, broken relationships, and even lifelong consequences. So here's the rule: always give yourself 5 minutes. When you feel that wave of anger rising, say to yourself, I will not react for the next 5 minutes. That's it. No complicated mantra, no long meditation, just 5 minutes. In that time, your heart rate will begin to settle. Your breathing will slow down, and your brain will shift from emotional reaction to logical thinking. Science backs this up. Strong emotions like anger usually peak and then start to drop within minutes if you don't feed them with action. Think about how many mistakes could be avoided if people just waited. Road rage, workplace conflicts, family arguments, most of them spiral out of control because someone couldn't hold back for even 1 minute. Let me give you an example. One of my students told me about a fight with his business partner. They had built a store together, but because they didn't set clear rules, resentment grew. One day, after yet another heated argument, my student was ready to walk out and dissolve the partnership, but he remembered this method. Instead of storming off, he took a walk outside for exactly 5 minutes. He didn't check his phone, he didn't rehearse comebacks in his head, he just breathed and counted the minutes. When he came back, his tone was calmer and they were able to talk. The problem wasn't solved instantly, but the 5-minute pause stopped an irreversible decision made in anger. Another example, think about professional athletes. A basketball player who loses his temper at a referee can get ejected from the game. But the great players know how to breathe, step aside, and give themselves space. They don't always succeed, everyone's human, but the ones who last the longest in their careers are those who master that first reaction window. Even in daily life, this step can save you. Imagine someone cuts you off in traffic. Your first impulse might be to honk, yell, or chase them down. But ask yourself, what do you really gain? Instead, remind yourself, 5 minutes. That's all I need. By the time you reach your destination, you won't even care. That's the power of giving yourself space. The beauty of step 1 is its simplicity. It doesn't require tools, training, or therapy. It just requires self-awareness and a tiny bit of discipline. And even if you fail sometimes, the practice itself makes you stronger. Maybe out of 10 angry moments, you succeed 8 times. That's already a massive improvement. So here's your takeaway. The first step to overcoming anger is to buy yourself time. 5 minutes is enough to transform an impulsive reaction into a thoughtful choice. The world won't end in 5 minutes, but your relationships, your job, and your peace of mind could be destroyed in 5 seconds if you lash out. From now on, whenever anger strikes, remember, don't react yet. Whisper to yourself, 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. Once you've given yourself 5 minutes of breathing room, it's time to move into step 2. The first scenario we'll cover is when your anger comes directly from another person. Let's be honest, people hurt us more deeply than events. Words sting, betrayals cut, and conflicts with someone close to us can feel unbearable. If you don't know how to handle this anger, can easily take over your entire day or even your entire life. So how do you deal with anger toward a person? The method is surprisingly simple, but very effective. The visualization technique. When someone makes you furious, find a quiet moment, even if you're at your desk, even if you can't leave the room. Sit down, close your eyes if possible, or simply lower your gaze. Then in your mind, imagine that person's face. Picture them clearly as if they're standing right in front of you. Now here's the key. Imagine pushing that image farther and farther away. See their face shrink in size. First, they're a few feet away, then across the room, then outside the building. Keep pushing until they're just a tiny dot in the distance. In your mind, reduce their presence until they're nothing more than a speck on the horizon. At that moment, say to yourself, you are just a dot in my life. You cannot control me. This technique might sound abstract, but it's actually rooted in psychology. Therapists call it distancing. By mentally shrinking the image of the person, you weaken their emotional grip on you. Instead of seeing them as an overwhelming force, you reduce them to something small and powerless. Why it works. Anger thrives when we feel trapped, when another person takes up too much space in our mind. Visualization breaks that illusion. It creates distance and reminds us that we are bigger than this moment, stronger than this emotion. You're not denying their existence. You're not pretending nothing happened. You're simply changing the scale of the problem in your mind so that it no longer consumes you. Example 1. Betrayal in business. One of my students went through a painful experience. He trusted a close friend to manage part of his business. Later, he discovered that this friend had been secretly taking profits. When he found out, his blood boiled. He wanted to confront the friend immediately, to shout and accuse. But instead, he practiced visualization. He sat down, pictured his friend's face, and pushed it away until it became a dot. By doing this, he reminded himself, this betrayal does not define me. This person cannot control my future. Only then did he have the clarity to take legal and professional steps instead of reacting emotionally and making the situation worse. Example 2. Family conflict. Sometimes the people who make us the angriest are not strangers, they're family. A student once told me how his brother constantly criticized his career choices. Every time they met, it ended in shouting. But after learning this method, he tried something different. The next time his brother's words triggered him, he quietly visualized his brother's face shrinking into the distance. In his mind, those cutting words lost their weight. Instead of exploding, he calmly said, "I appreciate your opinion, but I'll keep making my own choices." For the first time, the argument ended without fireworks. Example 3. Everyday annoyances. Even small interactions can ruin your mood if you let them. A rude cashier, a co-worker who interrupts you, a neighbor blasting music too loud, these moments pile up. Visualization works here too. When the cashier rolls their eyes, don't snap back. Picture their face shrinking into a tiny dot. Remind yourself they are just one person. They don't get to control my day. The science behind it. Researchers in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, often teach patients to reframe or zoom out of painful memories or triggers. This reduces emotional intensity. By visualizing someone as smaller and farther away, you literally change your brain's perception of the threat. Anger decreases and control returns. How to practice. Like any skill, this takes practice. Don't wait until you're furious to try it for the first time. Instead, rehearse when you're calm. Imagine someone who annoyed you in the past. Practice shrinking their face into the distance. With repetition, your brain learns the pattern, and when real anger strikes, the method becomes natural. Another tip: combine this with step 1. Take 5 minutes first, then use visualization. Together, they form a powerful 1-2 punch against anger. Key takeaway: when someone makes you angry, you don't have to let them dominate your mind. Through visualization, you take back control. You shrink their presence, reduce their power, and remind yourself they are just a dot in my life. This doesn't mean you avoid real action. If someone betrayed you, you still need to protect yourself legally or professionally. If a family member disrespects you, you may need to set boundaries. But the difference is you'll act with clarity, not rage. Closing thought. Every time you feel anger rising because of a person, remember this: their power over you exists only in your mind. You get to decide how big they are in your world. Through visualization, you can shrink them down until they can no longer hurt you. That's step 2A, your weapon against anger caused by people. Not all anger comes from the people we know. Sometimes the things that make us furious are accidents, strangers, or circumstances outside our control. Someone cuts us off on the highway. A stranger insults us online. A piece of technology fails at the worst possible moment. These situations can be just as infuriating as personal conflicts, sometimes even more, because we can't reason with them or demand accountability. So how do we deal with these moments? Step 2B is about facing anger caused by events or strangers, and the tool here is deceptively simple: write it down. The writing technique. Whenever something upsets you, take out a small notebook and pen something you carry with you, or use a sheet of paper. Write down exactly what happened or what was said. Don't filter it. Don't try to be polite. Capture the raw words, even if they're ugly. Then circle the part that hurt the most. Maybe it was an insult, maybe it was the word lazy, maybe it was the phrase "you're a scam." Focus on the exact trigger. Next, ask yourself 2 questions. Is this true? Is there another reason? By answering these, you force your brain to move from raw emotion to analysis. Instead of drowning in anger, you start to think. Example 1. Online insults. Let's say you're a creator on YouTube. You spend hours crafting a video only for someone to comment, "This guy is a scammer." Those words sting. Step 1. Write it down exactly. This guy is a scammer. Step 2. Circle the words that hurt the most. Maybe it's scammer. Step 3. Ask yourself, is this true? If you know your record is clean, the answer is no. Step 4. Ask, is there another reason? Maybe the person is just trolling or projecting their own frustration. Now you reach a conclusion. This is false. It has no basis. Then you can block the user filter comments and move on. Instead of replaying the insult all day, you've stripped it of power. Example 2. A stranger's mistake. Imagine you're at a coffee shop working on an important project. Your laptop has a broken battery, so it dies instantly if unplugged. You're typing away when someone pulls out your charger to plug in theirs. In a second, your unsaved work is gone. Your blood boils. You want to yell. Step 1. Write it down. He unplugged my charger. I lost my work. Circle the pain points. Lost my work, my effort. Now ask, is this true? Yes, you did lose work. But ask again, is there another reason? Yes, your battery was already broken, you hadn't saved your file, and you didn't warn anyone about the risk. Suddenly, the balance shifts. The stranger bears some fault, but so do you. Instead of exploding, you focus on what you can fix, buy a new battery, save files, more often sit near a better outlet. The anger turns into action. Example 3. Everyday inconveniences. Let's say your flight gets delayed for hours, or your luggage gets lost. These aren't anyone's direct fault, but the frustration is real. Writing still helps. My flight is delayed. I'll miss my meeting. I feel disrespected. Circle, miss my meeting. Ask, is this true? Yes, you may miss it. Is there another reason? Yes, weather, safety, logistics beyond your control. Now, instead of yelling at the airline staff who can't change the weather, you shift your focus, reschedule the meeting, send emails, use the time to read or plan. The situation hasn't changed, but your reaction has. Why it works. Writing externalizes the anger. When emotions stay in your head, they spin endlessly. On paper, they become concrete. You can analyze them, question them, and shrink their power. The two questions, is this true? Is there another reason, are especially powerful. They create distance between you and your anger, similar to Step 2A's visualization. You move from raw feeling to logical evaluation. Psychologists call this cognitive restructuring, rewiring the way you interpret events. Instead of accepting anger at face value, you challenge it. The power of action. The final step is action. Once you've written, circled, and questioned, decide what you can do next. If it's an online troll, block them. If it's a tech failure, fix the hardware. If it's a stranger's mistake, protect yourself for the future. Remember, anger often comes from feeling powerless. By taking action, even small, you reclaim control. Key takeaways. Always carry a notebook or a few sheets of paper. Write down the exact words or events that triggered you. Circle the most painful part. Ask, is this true? And is there another reason? Draw a conclusion and act. Closing thought. Life is full of strangers and unpredictable events. You can't control them all, but you can control your response. By writing things down and asking the right questions, you strip anger of its poison. Instead of being consumed, you turn frustration into clarity and action. That's the essence of Step 2B. Don't run from anger. Don't let it rot inside you. Face it, analyze it, and transform it into something you can control. Anger is one of the most destructive emotions we face. Left unchecked, it can ruin relationships, sabotage careers, and even harm our health. But as you've seen in this lesson, anger doesn't have to control you. With just 5 minutes and a simple 2-step method, you can take back control. Step 1 is the anchor. Give yourself 5 minutes before reacting. It sounds almost too simple, but those 5 minutes create the space your brain needs to cool down and move from raw emotion to rational thought. That pause alone can prevent words and actions you'll regret for years. Step 2 is the cure. Identify the source of your anger and apply the right technique. If the anger comes from a person, use visualization, push their image away until they're nothing more than a dot, reminding yourself that they cannot dominate your life. If the anger comes from an event or a stranger, use writing, put the pain on paper, circle. What hurts most? Ask the 2 key questions and draw a conclusion that leads to action. You won't win every time. Some days anger will get the best of you. But if you practice this method maybe 8 times out of 10, you'll stay in control. And those victories will change your life. You'll find yourself calmer in business, steadier in relationships, and more focused in daily challenges. So here's my final challenge to you. The next time you feel anger rising, whisper to yourself, 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. Then apply the steps. Don't wait until anger destroys something precious. Practice today. Share this method with a friend, because every time we control anger instead of letting anger control us, we make the world a little better.